might move. There she
Hi.
is.
I'm right behind them.
Sorry about that. There we go.
That was awkward.
That was awkward. You got to turn your. That was awkward. That was also clueless. So, welcome to Awkward and Clueless. We'll have to start again.
Okay, that sounds great.
So, unless you're a lip reader, Erica and I are together today.
Yes.
Erica came up to visit us in Vermont. And we've had a wonderful time. We went to the rod shop yesterday, and Erica saw how the rods are made. And then we went small stream fishing because it's a lot of fun and because our rivers are kind of high up here. So we went and chased some native brook trout in their native habitat yesterday. And Erica caught pile of fish.
Oh yeah, it was fun.
And her biggest brook trout ever. How big was it?
Oh, were you gonna say 6 inches?
No, it was bigger than 6. It might have been. It might have been
okay.
7.5 or 8.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a. For this stream, it was a big old male.
Yeah.
With a hook jaw, but it was about 8 inches long. And so we had a ball. We had a lot of fun, and we thought we'd talk about small stream fishing today because this program is mainly geared towards new people, right? New people that may feel awkward and clueless like us on a trout stream or on the water in general, not just on a trout stream. Small streams are a great place to go because, well, you don't have a lot of people. You don't get intimidated by big crowds of people. Don't have drift boats, right? Don't have rafts, don't have inner tubes. If they're small enough, you don't even have, swimming holes that people are in. So you often have them to yourself. They're usually wild trout. And the trout are, for the most part, stupid. They're easy to catch.
They're really active.
They're active. They're active feeders. They're typically easy to catch. You don't need a lot of gear, and I'll show you what kind of gear that I carry when I'm small stream fishing in a little bit. But if you want to just go and catch a lot of trout, it's a great way to do it.
Oh yeah, a lot of action.
Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of action, a lot of action. And you shouldn't be intimidated by the fact that the trees might be a little closer to the water, right?
Right.
Because you're going to get caught in trees, but if you take your time and you make short casts and you look behind you before you cast, you won't be that much in the trees. Some of these little tiny streams can get so overgrown that you can barely get into them, and they're you're going to have to just dip your fly in the water or bow and arrow cast or something. But most of the time you can get a decent little fly cast, and I mean little. I mean, you're talking 10 to 15 foot cast for the most part. Sometimes you're just casting your leader, so you don't want to and shouldn't make long casts. So your casting doesn't have to be that great. You don't need to be able to throw 40 feet of fly line. So it's fun, and it kind of takes you back to the basics of being a kid.
Yeah.
It's like what kids do, but adults can enjoy it too.
Absolutely. Yeah, we had a fun time.
We did.
Crawling over rocks.
Crawling over rocks, falling down, getting flies caught in trees.
Yep. And then just boots, and I was wearing sandals but wading, so we didn't have to wade her up or have a whole lot of gear too. So
Yeah. So it's it's a simple way of fishing, but can be just so much fun.
Yeah.
And it gives you your self-respect back. After fishing on a big river and getting skunked or having difficulties with trying to catch those snotty fish that get fished over, having the fish just take your fly the first cast or not at all.
Yes.
They either take it the first cast through the pool, or usually they don't take it.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
Yeah.
It was really fun. Let's talk about first of all, let's talk about how do you find them? How do you find small streams, Erica?
Oh, I kind of like to look at tributaries, maybe if I am fishing like a larger river, I kind of map out, is there a small creek that runs into that larger stream? Is kind of my way of finding that.
Yep. So that's the way you usually find them.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes you might even want to go to the tributaries of tributaries.
Oh,
right?
yeah, exactly. Absolutely.
And you'll hear the term blue lining, which is using a topo map or a terrain map to find these little blue lines. Google Earth, the satellite view isn't very good at finding these because they're often closed in and they often don't even show up on it.
Yeah, I noticed that here on the East Coast. In the West, it's kind of nice to use Google Map. And I was trying to find the stream, and it was just a lot of foliage.
True, in the West where you don't have as much tree cover.
Right.
Yeah, in the Eastern United States, and you can find these small streams anywhere from Georgia up through the maritime provinces of Canada on the East Coast, and in Michigan and Pennsylvania and Ohio. Not so much Ohio. You don't have as much cold. You don't have as much high terrain, so you don't have as much cold water. There are a few in Ohio. There's actually, believe it or not, there's actually something like 100 miles of wild brook trout streams in New Jersey. So you can find them everywhere, and of course, nearly anywhere in the West.
Yeah, I would say, and it's also kind of tricky because it looks really low, so I wouldn't expect there to be fish in there.
Yeah. Well, that's what protects them,
Exactly.
right? From most anglers. One of the things I always tell people is that don't just driving by a stream. Don't have a preconception that it's not going to hold trout, because once you get down in them, once you start wading around in them or walking the bank, you'll see that there's deeper pools. Trout only need about 1.5 feet, 2 feet of water for protection, and you'll find those pools. You'll find those spots. Sometimes the small streams, they'll be in 1 foot of water. Less than 1 foot, you want to look for deeper spots.
Yeah,
they don't like because of the way predators dive into the water and chase trout. They can't penetrate. I think if an osprey can't penetrate more than 2 feet of water or something like that. I've read it somewhere recently. So anyway, yeah. How have you tell us about how a couple that because you found some cool small streams recently. How did you find them?
Yeah. Just kind of asking around, and also just kind of I've been using Google Maps on the west, so and looking tributaries of tributaries, and just kind of trying it out. You know, I see a body of water, and I'm like, hey, I have some time. Why not check it out? And I was pleasantly surprised to see that fish can live in those smaller streams. For sure. Yeah.
You're probably not going to find them on the internet. I mean, as far as chats and stuff like that. You probably won't find them in social media because a lot of people won't share the small streams because they've discovered these little gems that are almost private to them, even if they're on public land. We fished one yesterday, the one Erica caught her big brook trout on, and I told her, I don't think anyone else ever fishes this little stream ever. I've never seen anyone there or heard of anybody fishing it, and it's really close to a decent sized Vermont town. So you can find them, but you got to do some exploring.
Oh yeah. I think that's part of the process too, is figuring it out. It's that unknown and kind of that adventurous type of fishing journey. So yeah.
So doing exploring, and again, being a kid and just taking some hikes, even if it's not trout season, if it's before or after the season, take a hike in some areas and look around and see if you can see any trout in there, or see if it looks trouty, if it looks deep enough to hold trout. I explore some of these on the off season with my family during the wintertime, just walking along little streams. So
good idea.
So do we have any questions, Julia, that we should answer before we go any further? Oh, by the way, Julia is here as well. Everybody is here today. Julia has never been in there's her hand. Julia's got a knee problem, so she's got her knee propped up and she can't get up but anyway, so we're all here. We're all here together today. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
I'm just looking to see. There is just one question from Jeff. Once you find a small stream that has trout, should you share its location with others? Oh,
should you? I wouldn't, unless they're really close friends. It depends on how generous you are. I share a few of them with my friends. There's a couple that I don't tell anybody about, except Erica. but she lives in Colorado, so
exactly. Yeah, you can tell your friends from out of town.
Yeah, you tell your friends from out of town. Take them there once, and then and don't let them take any pictures because they can pull the GPS coordinates off the EXIF on the photograph. So don't let them take any pictures.
Oops. I like the rod length and the rod weight. So that was my first time yesterday throwing a 3-weight all day. I'm normally used to the average 5-weight. So yeah, it was really fun. It took me a little bit, I feel like, to kind of slow down the cast, but it was really fun.
Well, Erica was hindered yesterday because I had just been fishing a little bit bigger river with 7X and a size 24 fly, and I was too lazy to put on a shorter leader. I did cut it back to 4X, but it was still a long leader. And 7.5-foot leader is typically all you need in these streams because your floats are very short and your casts are very short. And a 3-weight is fun because the trout are small. That being said, you don't need to go out and buy a new rod. And I shouldn't say that because I work for Orvis, but you don't need to go out and buy a new rod. You can use a 9-foot 5-weight in small streams. I've done it plenty of times. You don't have to, but it makes it, light little, short little rod that bends. Does make it more fun and makes it a little bit easier to cast. Now, I wouldn't go too short. The reason is that you often want to keep your line and most of your leader off the water because you're making these short little casts and you just get a short little drift and then you pick up and put it back down again. You don't want a lot of line on the water because it'll make your fly drag, whether it's a dry fly or a nymph. And so you don't want them too short. 7.5 is a good length. 7-footer is okay for really small streams. If you really like the idea of a 6-foot or a 6.5-foot rod, then go ahead and fish it. But you don't need it, and you can get away with a 9-foot rod in small streams. You really can. So you don't need a special rod if you can't afford one or you don't want to buy a new rod until you decide you really love this small stream fishing.
Yeah.
Standard floating line is fine. You don't need a sink tip. You don't need any poly leaders or anything to get your fly down. And it's mostly dry fly or dry dropper stuff. Little streamers will work sometimes. They didn't work yesterday.
No.
Often in these little streams, there aren't a lot of bait fish. There's only trout because particularly when you're fishing for brook trout or cutthroats way up high in the mountains, there aren't any bait fish there. Nothing can survive other than trout. Trout are better at surviving in these cold, relatively sterile streams than any other fish.
Yeah.
So you don't often find bait fish in there. You might find small trout, but you won't find bait fish. Adam asked about Euro nymphing. You can Euro nymph. Yep, you can Euro nymph. I don't think you want one of those 11-foot rods for Euro nymphing, but you can, it's more kind of standard tight lining, I guess. An 8-foot rod or even a 7.5-foot rod, you can lead those nymphs down through a small pocket. I don't do it that often. I think that a dry dropper is more effective than Euro nymphing. The fish are very inclined, because they're in shallow water, to come up for a fly. They can see a dry fly from a longer distance away. And you don't need to sink your nymph really deep. The fish are always looking up for their food. So if you and when you fish dry dropper, you don't need to be scratching bottom. In fact, you shouldn't. I don't find it very effective. So put that nymph on a really short leash, like a foot or so, a foot or even 8 inches. You don't need a long dropper unless you're in a really deep waterfall pool or something like that. Then you might want to go a little deeper.
Roger Burr had a great question earlier. When you get to the stream, how do you figure out which fly or flies to use?
You know what? That's the cool thing, Roger. You don't really need to worry about it because these fish don't have a lot of food. They're eating about 80% of their diet in a lot of these small streams is terrestrial insects. So they're eating stuff that falls in, and they're eating moths, and they're eating beetles, and they're eating ants and grasshoppers. And they don't have the luxury of being selective. And just an attractor dry fly with some sort of attractor nymph or generic nymph on there is going to be your best bet. Pick one. Yeah. What did we use yesterday? Parachute Adams.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Parachute Adams, Chubby Chernobyl, Stimulator are all good ones. Any of the foam flies are great. And then for a nymph, a prince nymph or a hare's ear, you don't need to get fancy with this stuff. And you don't need small flies. I saw a question about smaller flies. No. You don't want small flies, and you don't need them. There's a couple of reasons. One is that the fish will eat a bigger fly in most of these small streams. They're not selective, and they're gonna grab it if it looks buggy at all. They're gonna grab it and they're gonna sample it. There's a lot of small. You can catch a lot of little tiny. I mean, like even too small, like this long, a couple inches long fish occasionally, and they will try to grab a size 10 dry fly. You don't really want to hook those. So by using a little bit larger hook, you can sort through those really tiny fish. I typically use 10s, 12s, and 14s on small streams. I never go smaller than, seldom go to a 16. You ever go any smaller than
Not really, not for small streams. No, I think I like just seeing the action, even when the little fly tries to go for a bigger hook and they just can't. They physically can't. So it's just fun. It's just a lot of action. So
Erica had one fish that came 7 times for the same fly.
That was really fun.
And that brings up another good point. These fish they're real often small and they're really fast, and you're gonna miss a lot of fish.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna miss a ton of fish, and that's part of the game. The fun is just getting them to rise, and you're gonna miss a lot of fish, and they're gonna flip off because you're using barbless hooks. They're gonna flip off a lot because they really squirm and wiggle more than a larger fish. So you're gonna lose a lot of them, but no big deal. Losing a 6-inch fish is not a big deal to most of us. And you may even cause some fish to go airborne when you set the hook, like back over your shoulder. So you have to be careful. Normally use unweighted nymphs on the dropper. Yeah, Dave, it depends on the depth of the water, but I like to use unweighted. In fact, yesterday I said, I wish I had a big hairser that was unweighted because I thought I was getting too deep. Erica kept snagging on the bottom. So unweighted nymphs are good. You may want some bead heads for, if you get into it like a deeper plunge pool or a little bit deeper pocket. So carry a couple bead heads with you, but yeah, you don't need that much. Travis says, I need smaller flies occasionally here in the UK. Yeah. One thing that we should mention is that if the stream you're fishing is a spring creek, it's a slow flowing clear with a lot of fish in it, those fish can get as picky as fish in bigger rivers. What I'm talking more about are mountain or pasture streams that aren't true spring creeks, that don't have a lot of food in them. So, and you have more of the spring creek type or chalk streams in England than we do here in the States. What else? You want to see what I maybe I'll show you what I carry for small stream fishing, and then that might stimulate some questions. So let me switch to the other camera here. So you can really fit everything in a pocket. Okay. You can really fit everything in your pocket. I carry more than I need, but this is a little waist pack that I wear, and it's nice because I'm not going to wade very deep. I'm not very tall, but I'm not going to wade very deep. So I can just wear a waist pack, and I can slide it around behind me to get it out of the way when I don't need it. And I carry a spool of 4X and 5X in monofilament for my dry fly, and then in fluorocarbon for my nymphs if I'm fishing dry dropper. So that's all. And you could probably just get away with 4X or just 5X in a lot of streams. So you don't need a lot of tippet. And then I do carry a lot of fly floating. I carry gel. I carry this my new favorite fly dip, which is a liquid, and then I carry the desiccant powder. Because you're fishing dry flies, and one of the most important things is you got to be able to see your fly. Because you're fishing dry dropper, you need to be able to see your dry to see if fish takes the nymph. And also, you need to see exactly where your fly is because casts need to be accurate. And so you need a fly with a white wing or a pink wing or a foam fly that floats high so you can see it on the water. So I use these a lot. How often did I retreat your fly? Like every dozen casts yesterday?
Oh yeah.
So, and then you want a pair of snips. Although I use my teeth a lot. You want a pair of snips and a pair of forceps or whatever you use for removing hooks and for debarbing hooks in case they're not debarbed. And I got a couple leaders in here, but you don't need to usually carry extra leaders. And then I just use one fly box. This is my small stream box, and there's just, you can see a bunch of big dries that are highly visible, a few slightly smaller dries, and then a bunch of nymphs, worms, one little streamer, and just a few nymphs. So it doesn't have to be complicated. You can literally fit everything in your pocket. The reason I carry this, you can see I got a lot of room left in there. Reason I have room left in there is because I often take a small waterproof camera, and put it in there. So that's really all you need. It's not very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Questions about gear?
Oh, what about a net?
A net. I don't carry a net in small streams because the fish are so small. You can just grab them with your hand, cup them with your hand, and it might be a good idea to carry a small net just to immobilize the fish while you're removing the hook. I don't. Do you carry a net, small streams?
I'm thinking about. Well, they've been swimming through the actual netting because they're just so tiny.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about a goldfish net.
a go. That's a good one.
Yeah, right. Soon on the Orvis store, we'll see.
Yeah. And Brandon says catch and release tool is indispensable. Yep, I think you saw I had one in there. Let's see. Like the idea of that pack. All those ointments are essential for me now. The rivers I fish are freestone with some small streams. Yeah. If I lose my desiccant powder, I'm screwed. I'm in big trouble because I can't fish. I got to keep that fly floating high, and I got to be able to see it. So I use it a lot. I use a lot of it. I buy it in bulk. What other questions do we have, Julia, that I missed? And you occasionally may find yourself with a big trout. You never know.
Oh yeah.
Some streams don't have the food supply to grow fish very big. The stream we were in yesterday, there was no chance of catching a fish over 8 inches long. Yep. You caught the monster.
That's right.
But if you're fishing a tributary to a bigger river, there is always a chance for catching a larger trout, or if the stream has the food supply to support bigger fish. Does that small bag have a place for a net? No, it does not. Does not have a place for a net. Nope, not the waist pack. You could use a small sling bag that has a D-ring for a net. But you could stick the net in the back of your pants or your waders or whatever. You're not going to need a big net. What constitutes a fly to be an attractor? Aren't they all supposed to attract? No, they're all supposed to imitate, actually. Attractor is a funny term because I don't believe there's a such thing as an attractor, and I use the term, and I probably shouldn't have. If a fish takes your fly, it's not taking it because it was attracted to it. It's taking your fly because it thinks it was food, right? And I think we call kind of generic insect imitations like a chubby Chernobyl or some of the foam flies or a parachute Adams. We call it an attractor because it imitates lots and lots of different things, some of which we don't even know about. But they're not really attractors.
Or
what do you think?
Yeah, or they're just not imitating like a specific hatch.
Right.
That's kind of what I.
Yeah, that's what we call attractors. But if fish eat your fly, it thinks it's food. They're not curious. They don't have the luxury of being curious.
Yep.
Any thoughts on North Country spiders fished across and down? No, but they work well, Tim. We didn't talk about. I can't believe nobody asked about fishing upstream or downstream. Usually people do. You have to decide what you want to do first. And if you want to fish wet flies and swing them, which can be very effective, or North Country spiders or soft hackles or whatever, then probably it's a good idea to fish downstream because you work downstream because you're fishing down and across. Most of what we do here, I know, Tim, I know you're from the UK. Most of what we do here in the States is dry dropper or just dry fly. Often it's just a dry fly because dry fly can be more effective than a nymph in many cases. So we're fishing upstream, and it's problematic fishing downstream. It's hard to get a good drift, and the fish are facing upstream. And so you have to stay a little bit further away. And if you stay further away, you may not be able to get a good presentation to those fish because the pockets are so small usually that there's lots of different currents between you and where you're fishing. So you really have to get as close as you can to them. So I would recommend you fish upstream for the most part in small streams. What I typically do is park my car upstream, and then I walk down a road or walk down a path, and then fish upstream back to my car. Sometimes I go well past my car.
Oh yeah. We had a nice walk back to the car yesterday.
So,
well, that's also a thing of not staying stuck in one spot. You're constantly moving because once you have a few casts in a certain hole, fish are pretty. They kind of catch on, or you kind of spook them. So constantly moving, looking for the next one. So I think we got in our miles yesterday.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Something that we should mention is that you don't want to you want to tarry a long time unless it's a big deep pool and you think you might have a chance. Usually 3 or 4 casts in each little pocket and then move on. Mm-hmm. And you may have to walk between spots. You may have to walk 100 yards between good spots because some of these small streams, the fish are only going to be in the deeper pockets, and it's definitely depth that's a limiting factor in these streams. Mm-hmm. So you got to look for water that has enough depth. What time of day is best? That's a good question. That's a good question, Jeff. It's going to vary with with the weather conditions, but generally, happily, they typically fish best in the middle of the day. Do you agree with that?
I would actually agree. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's because they're eating a lot of terrestrial insects, and the terrestrial insects really don't get active until midday or late morning, and often these streams are very cold, mm-hmm. and they don't warm up enough for the fish to get active. So middle of the day is great because you need a lot of light. You need a lot of sunlight to be able to see in these small streams. They can be really good in the evening, but it's often difficult to see your fly in the evening because they're usually in a canopy or in a little canyon and it gets dark and you can't see. They can fish well in the evening. Early morning, in my experience, is not as good. So it's neat. It's middle of the day, and it's usually middle of the summer that they're best. When the bigger rivers get too warm or too low or too crowded. Here in New England, our little streams fish best in July and August, or late June, July and August. You can catch them. You can catch fish earlier in the season, certainly, but they fish really well in the middle of the day on a hot day. So so you don't have to be an early riser. You don't have to stay late. You can fish at the more comfortable time of day. Oh, what else do we have? Julia, did we miss any other questions?
You got the floating question?
I guess so.
About if you can reapply it and...
Oh, no.
Can you reapply floating to a fly that's been soaked, or does it have to?
Yes. If you're going to reapply something, you want to use either the desiccant powder, which is, what does Orvis call it? High float, shake and float, renew, and that's a good name because it renews the fly. It sucks the water out of the fly, takes the fish slime off, and then it puts a new layer of silicone on it. You can also use that liquid fly dip. That does work for a retreatment. You can't use the gel floating for a retreatment. It doesn't work. So yes, you can and should reapply floatant constantly. Constantly. I saw something else. Do you ever use an Amadou pad to treat your flies? I don't, Roger. They work, but they don't work as well as the silicone stuff. Sometimes I'll use my shirt to take the initial moisture off the fly and then dip it in one of the floatants. Man, that was a pretty old leader Tom has in that back. Yeah. Yeah, you notice the old leader packaging, huh? Yeah, I save my old leaders for small streams because I know I don't care. I'm not going to break it off on a fish, so I use my old leaders. Let's see. What else? What if you have a light rod and hit a big one? What strategies do you use for not breaking your leader or rod? Well, you probably won't break your rod if you play the fish properly, Eric. Just get right up on them. If you get a big fish in a small pool and it's tearing up the pool, just get right up close to them. Just walk right up to them and try to get close to them. Try to steer them away from logs, and you may break them off.
Yeah.
But you're not using really light tippets. You're using 4X usually, so you can usually handle, if you do get that big fish, you can usually handle them pretty well. And you can even use 3X, on some of these smaller streams, particularly if the water's really fast and you're using a bigger fly. You can get away with 3X often. Brian's been using the liquid. Brian using gel. Yeah, Brian, the gel just doesn't work. Once your fly is wet, you can use the gel for your preliminary treatment when a fly is still dry, but it just doesn't seem to work once a fly is wet. So yeah, you get some of that shake and float stuff. You'll be happy with it. Mm-hmm. Rods. The limit to casting distance. I got a really dirt cheap rod. The line seems to be okay, but the rod doesn't shoot line. I'm trying many techniques to improve. Shooting line is generally Raphael shooting line is usually related to your technique. Make sure the line is clean. Make sure you straighten the kinks out of it. Make sure you release the line at the proper time. You don't want to release that line until your loop is going forward. And a good rule of thumb is when you first see the rod tip come into view, that's when you shoot the line. So that may help. Try that. But it's usually your technique and not the line or the rod. Unless you're trying to shoot more the line than the rod can handle. I mean, that can happen too. What type of tip material is best to keep from dragging really small dries under on the drift? Well, Roger nylon tippet, any good nylon tippet. And good point. I will often grease my entire leader up to the dry fly. I don't think it bothers the fish at all to have a floating leader, and it'll help keep your fly floating and visible. So by greasing it, I mean taking some of that gel floating and just rubbing it on your leader or anything, nose grease or Vaseline, any kind of grease or oil on that nylon tippet is going to make it float.
Some earwax.
Earwax, yeah. Whatever. But yeah. Use a rubber band to flip excess water off. Yeah, that's a good. You do that, Drick?
Never heard of that.
Yeah, it's you have a rubber band on, a little retainer or something, and you hook your fly in the rubber band, and you flick the rubber band and it flicks the water off the fly. Yeah, it's a cool trick. Yep. Big takeaway for me today after fly fishing for decades: the heavier weight leaders on these types of streams I've been using way too light, apparently. Yeah, you don't need it. You don't need it too light, Larry. And you're fishing a big, fairly air resistant dry fly, and you want your tippet to mostly straighten. So don't need a light leader. What about small stream steelhead? Small stream steelhead, usually the best technique is because you usually can't get a swing over the fish. There isn't enough current width to swing a fly. Most people will use a indicator with a nymph or two, egg fly or a nymph or two. Yeah. That's and you do want to scratch bottom usually with steelhead, so you do want to have a little bit longer tippet below your indicator. Mm-hmm. Will we see you guys in South Africa? I have no plans. Do you?
Oh, well, that's Julia.
Yeah. Taking on the road.
I think if we go on the road, there'll be some other places we'll go before South Africa.
Never know.
What cast do you use to put slack in line to prevent fly drag? What do you use?
Well, I was just kind of doing roll casts, and then we were just fishing the leader, so we didn't need a whole lot of line out. So, yeah. What about you?
Yeah, Tim, I'll often do a parachute or pile cast where you kind of aim a little bit high and then drop the rod so that you get the little slack in your leader. Because you're right, drag is a critical thing in small streams. Even a fish that has never seen a fly before, they don't see the stuff that they eat dragging, skittering across the surface. Not like a fly drags. They see flies bouncing and flipping around, but that's tough to imitate with what we're doing. So eliminating drag is super important, even in wilderness fish. Okay, an occasional twitch will work.
Yeah.
Occasional twitch will work, particularly in the fall when there's a lot of leaves and debris with the dry flies. Sometimes a twitch just one little twitch to let the fish know the fly's alive. Remember when we were fishing a foam pocket, I've noticed over the years that if you have a big thick area of foam, and you sometimes do in small streams, sometimes you drag or twitch a fly through the foam, the fish will come up and take it. Not so much in smooth water, but in foam. And I don't mean whitewater foam. I mean the foam that kind of collects on the surface. Sometimes dragging a fly through that foam mass will work. What's a minimum size fly you can use on a 4X? Wouldn't that be a pretty large fly for a small fish? Yeah, it would, and that's a reason for using a bigger fly, so that you catch the 7 and the 8 and the 9 inches, and you don't catch the 2 and 3 inches, because they will try to take it. They will try to take it. Believe me. Tips for fishing on still water in warm weather. Well, we're talking about small streams today, Ryan, but I would say fish slow and fish deep. Fish a sinking line. What do you think? You fish much still water?
Not really.
I don't fish a lot of it either. No, but fish often go deep in lakes because the water is warm toward the surface, and so getting down to the fish is probably the most important thing. They learn small streams. If I flip my hat backwards, I catch less trees when casting. Huh. If I flip my hat now, why would flipping your hat backwards
like a rally cap or something?
I don't know. I can't, Brian, I can't quite understand why that would work, but I'll try it.
Or you can use your hat as a net.
Yeah, that's what somebody said. Yeah, use your hat as a net. That's all you need, really, is a hat. There was something else was going to mention. I forgot what I was going to mention. I'll think of it. Oh, the minimum size fly you can use with 4X. You can use a size 16 fly with 4X. If you get it through the eye,
Yeah.
you can use 16 with 4X. I've used 18s with 4X occasionally. So, yeah, you can. Oh, I know what I was going to mention is casting.
Mm-hmm. I was getting a little frustrated at some points, just getting caught in trees, but
Yeah.
it was still fun.
Yeah. Learn the roll cast.
Yes.
The roll cast will be your best friend. And if you're fishing one of these high floating dry flies and you put enough stuff on it,
yeah,
it'll you can roll cast a dry fly multiple times without false casting. It'll still float. Oh, should we tell them about the double dip?
Oh yeah, double stuff.
Double stuff. So I've found that if you dip your fly in this stuff, fly dip, the liquid, dry it off a little bit, and then shake it up with this powder, the fly will really float high.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So we were calling that the double dip yesterday. So try the double dip. See how that works for you. Because you do need to keep that fly floating and invisible. You really do. You do need to do that. Yeah. Still don't know about turning your hat backwards. All the briefs I hear on small streams either recommend short, soft 4 or 5 weight rods or longer 2, 3, 4 weights. Any thoughts on which is better or is situation dependent? Gabriel, it's not so much situation dependent as it is what you like to cast, what you prefer. Both will work. But it really depends on what you like to use. One thing you can do with some rods is to overline them because you're casting so short. The line that's rated for your rod isn't really meant, unless it's designed as a small stream rod like the Orvis fiberglass rods or some of the shorter recon rods that we used to call superfines. Sometimes rods will be a little too stiff to cast short, and by overlining, by putting a 5 weight on a 4 weight rod, it'll bend the rod on a shorter cast, and it'll help that rod flex and cast a little bit better for you. So, don't be afraid to overline. Don't underline your rods, but overline them, and that'll sometimes work. Have you used a Tenkara rod? I have, Earl. I have used a Tenkara rod for small streams. Have you?
Just once.
Yeah. What did you think of it?
It was fine. I do kind of like some line or the reeling in
Uh-huh.
action. Yeah, so it's just my preference, but I would do it again.
Yeah. There's an advantage of a Tenkara rod in that you have a long rod. You don't have any fly lines, so you get really good drag-free floats, and you can just put it out there over that little pocket and drift it through. That's the advantage. The disadvantage is Tenkara rods are long, and walking through the woods in between spots. You can collapse a Tenkara rod, but then you gotta open it up again when you get to the next spot. So they have their advantages and disadvantages. If it's a big open mountain stream without any canopy, then they work really well. If it's a little tighter stream with more brush, then the Tenkara rod is going to be a little bit more difficult to fish. What dry flies would you recommend for browns in fall, small creek and streams? Parachute Adams, Chubby Chernobyl, and a stimulator. There's 3 for you. You can throw in an elk-hair cat. Elk-hair caddis is a good small stream fly too. It's highly visible, floats well, and it looks like a moth. And I think fish eat a lot of moths in small streams. Does Orvis ever do a video on the bow and arrow cast? We haven't done a video on the bow and arrow cast. and we probably should. It's not too hard. Basically, a bow and arrow cast is just not having any line out and pulling your leader back and letting it go. Right? It's a bow and arrow cast. Now, there's a way of getting a longer bow and arrow cast that Joe Humphreys uses, and I think there's some videos on that online. But Orvis has not done one. Hat reverse gets bill out of the way when looking up and behind to guide backcast. Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, now we know. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. If any of you are readers and like to research these things, I've actually written a book on small stream fly fishing that has lots more than we're going to talk about in here. But there's a book if you're interested in researching it further. There's also some videos on the Orvis Learning Center on small stream fishing. So you can check those out. What is the best average sized nymph for 6-weight rod? And what is the smallest fish you... What is the smallest fly you can use? Oh, on a 6-weight rod. Best average size. Best average size, William, is really going to depend on the fish are going to tell you that. It depends on the conditions. Sometimes a size 8, big size 8 nymph will work if there's a lot of stoneflies and big mayflies. Sometimes you need to go to an 18 or 20. They can all be fished on a 6-weight rod. And you can fish easily down to a size 20 with a 6-weight rod. You're not going to have the delicacy you would with a 4, 3, 4, or 5, but you can do it. Yep. But there is no best average size. I mean, if you want one, I'll say size 14. That's a good average size nymph. A lot of mayflies are 14 or 16. A lot of mayflies are, and caddisflies are in that size. Mm-hmm. What's your preferred all-purpose leader weight? Length. Ryan, in small streams, it's 7.5 feet. Mm-hmm. And in medium-sized streams, 9 feet. And actually, from if it's not a small stream, I typically fish 12-footers at least. Sometimes I make them longer than 12. What about you?
Same, yeah. Oh, I'm not that long in bigger streams, but normally a 7.5 in small. But you kind of got me on a little bit of a longer one yesterday.
Yeah, that was my fault. I just wasn't prepared. I didn't switch leaders. I was lazy. Micro brown woolly bugger drugged slowly on the bottom. Best easy solution. There are times, Eric, when a small woolly bugger will work. That will sometimes work, particularly in deeper pools and small streams. Yep. Good point. Eric and Tom. Let's see. We're heading up to Yellowstone next week. Snagged a campground on the Mass. We'll be going through Dubois. Do you have a criteria for looking for small streams on a map?
We were just talking about Dubois last night.
Yeah, we were.
We love that place.
Yeah. So, Erica, why don't you, since you're a Western person, what are your criteria for looking for small streams on a map?
On a map. I mean, looking for those bigger streams and looking for valleys. Typically there's especially in Dubois, there's the Wind River. And so I just kind of look for really small tributaries that are going into there. So just what you were talking about earlier, blue lining, right? Blue lining a map. And then seeing if I can zoom in on an app. I personally use Onyx. I know that you have a different app that you use.
Gaia. Yeah. But a good app on your phone that has topo. You want to have both topo and satellite and switch back and forth.
Yeah, and also if you can get it available offline too, especially in the West. And I'm finding out in Vermont doesn't have a great cell phone service. So just kind of looking at the maps and how can you. That's kind of the adventure of it, is you don't really know. is just kind of looking to see if you can find any blue spots. Sometimes they're also seasonal as well, but just kind of exploring and kind of trial and error a little bit sometimes.
If it's a tributary to a bigger trout stream, it's got some trout in it. They may be small, but it could be big, but it's going to have some trout in it. So, you mentioned the Wind River, which is the river through there. There are a lot of small streams up in the national forest in that area that are very good.
Also taking a hike too, along those bigger waters as well, if you have the time for it, right? And then you can kind of branch off if you find a little creek or a little stream.
Yeah. If you probably know this, I'm sure it's going to be pretty obvious, but if you're fishing small streams in Yellowstone, and Yellowstone has some good ones, take bear spray.
Yeah.
That's what keeps a lot of people off the small streams in Yellowstone, fear of grizzly bears. I don't think it's a big danger, but take bear spray.
Yeah, good idea.
And make a lot of noise and be bear aware.
Yes.
As they say. Is it more effective to tie dry dropper on the hook or both lines tied to the loop? When I'm fishing small streams, fly fishing brown girl, I like to tie to the bend. What about you?
Yeah, same on the bend.
Yeah, just on the bend. Opinion on trout rods. Trout routes? Roger, I don't know what trout routes are. Maybe you meant rods. Please clarify, Roger Bird. What do you prefer for connecting your leader to fly line? I use a loop to loop. What do you use?
Yep, same.
Yep.
Yep.
Some people like a nail knot because it's a little cleaner, but then you have a permanent leader and it's harder to switch it. But loop to loop.
Yep.
I think it is an app. Oh, trout routes. Oh, it's an app, Roger. I never heard of it. Sorry, I can't help you. It's a trout fishing map app for cell phones. Yeah, sorry, I've never heard of it. I'll have to look at it, Roger.
Yeah, the most personally effective for me, I like, is it shows public land. Like where I live is really grid locked, or there's a lot of grids, so access can be difficult sometimes. So I like Onyx personally.
Yeah, Onyx, and I don't think Gaia uses. I don't think Gaia shows land ownership, but there's another app I use. I can't remember the name, but let me look it up here. There's another app I use a lot for land ownership, and it's called Basemap. Basemap is a good one. You have to get the premium version of it, the paid version, to get land ownership. But that's a good Onyx. So Onyx has land ownership for public lands.
Yep.
Yeah. Roger, that trout routes thing. A lot of problem with those fishing apps are that they're crowdsourced, and so the information isn't vetted, and I find it often not very reliable. But if it works for you, great. How do you take what you learn on small streams and upscale to fish it on larger waters? I think, Brandon, one of the most important lessons you can learn on small streams is how to get a drag-free float, because you really need to get a drag-free float. And since you're up close and personal with your cast, you can see what affects drag. And that and working on casting accuracy, I think, because you need to be accurate in small streams. You need to hit those little pockets. That's what I would say. Yeah. This is a good one. Deep plunge pools. I never have luck with dry flies or my typical droppers either. those can be tough, Gabriel, plunge pools, because you know there's trout in there. We fished one yesterday. I know there's a fish in there. And what worked for us, and I find it often works, is you're going to have to stop and put a longer dropper and maybe a higher floating dry fly that'll suspend a little bit bigger nymph and get it down deeper in the pool, because they're deeper than what you've been fishing, right, for the past couple hundred yards, and you may need to adjust your tactics a little bit. You actually did catch a couple fish when we went to a longer dropper. The other thing is, there was a couple other things. One is maybe try a small weighted woolly bugger through the pool, deep plunge pool. That may work. The other thing is that often in those deep plunge pools, the fish don't feed up in the deep water, but they'll drop down into shallower water and feed in the tail of that pool. And what a lot of us do, and I'm as guilty as anyone, is we walk right up to the plunge pool and we throw into the deep water at the head of the pool when the fish were actually down in the tail out of that plunge pool feeding. And when we walk up, we spook them. So my advice is to take some casts, sneak up on that plunge pool and take some casts in the tail out of it, just in the very lip of that tail out. And, you either catch a fish there or you don't, and then work up, toward the deeper water. But they're not always in that real super deep water. There isn't a lot of food in that deep water. They'll use it for protection when they get scared, but they'll often feed a lot shallower, even though they have deep water available to them. So that's a good question. Yeah. I get that question a lot.
Yeah, that was a good tactic yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, Gaia shows over ownership in premium version. Thank you. I have the premium version. I haven't looked. So, it may have been added recently. So thank you for that. I'll have to check that out. I do like Basemap as well, though. Basemap is another good app. I do a lot of hiking, so I have a couple of apps. Do you always match the hatch or just chuck anything? How about you?
Yeah, anything really, especially, as we're talking with small streams, they don't see a whole lot. So just kind of anything. It was really fun to, parachute Adams is what we started out with. And that was just it looked like it was just convenient.
Yeah. But you'll start out, I never match the hatch because I never see hatches in the small streams I fish ever. I might see an occasional bug. And if I do, I might try to imitate it. Usually not. Usually those fish will take a big dry fly regardless. And you'll probably find that you put on a dry fly and you fish it and you won't change it all day unless it gets too drowned. Because if they're going to eat a dry fly, they'll eat almost anything if they're looking up. Let's see here. Lots of great question. How do you keep the fly line from pulling the leader back down the guides? Oh, you need a much longer leader, Roger, or you either need a much longer leader, like 2 rod lengths long, at least, so that you don't have the fly line pulling it back through, or you get yourself a dedicated Euro nymphing line that is very narrow in diameter. I do. And then I don't. Look like a robocall. So yeah, you're going to have to either go one or two ways, Roger, a much longer leader or a dedicated Euro nymphing line. Is it better to fish upstream or downstream when wading? Upstream. Done. We already went through that. You must have come in late, John.
Oh, it's about your car's warranty. But
what's that? Oh, yeah. No, I already got 2 extended warranty calls today, so it's probably something else.
We're gonna start popping up on your live show here.
Used to fish the undercut banks with good luck and a few nice small streams. Yeah, Brian. If you have an undercut bank in a stream, particularly in meadow streams, those are great places for fish because they can hide. They can hide under the bank and they can dart out and feed out in the open because they won't feed. They won't actually feed as much when they're in an undercut bank because the undercut bank usually strains all the food away from them. So they'll be in the undercut, but they'll be looking out usually to the middle or the sides of the river. And so they'll dart out of that undercut bank. But yeah, never pass one up. Definitely never pass one up. Good point. I've read several books by Harry Middleton who fished North Carolina, West Virginia. I've wanted to go out there and wonder where to start. Any suggestions? If there's a fair amount of public access? Yes, there is, Earl, and I would suggest that you contact one of the Orvis stores in D.C. or in Virginia or North Carolina for the best local information. Yep, there is a fair amount of public access. Yep, and there's the National Forest there, which has lots and lots of cool little trout streams and public access. What is the easy but productive dry fly pattern for a novice fly tire? Oh, good. Ooh. For a novice fly tire, I would say elk hair caddis. Some of these other ones, parachute Adams, not easy. Stimulator's not terribly easy. Chubby Chernobyl, not bad, but it's not easy. I would start with like a size 12 elk hair caddis. That would be a good one for a novice fly tire. It's fairly basic fly. It's one we teach in our Fly Tying 101 classes, and it's highly visible and floats well. So I'd start with that. Well, thank you, Adam. So much private land in New Jersey. Does New York, Pennsylvania have more small streams on public land? They do in like in the Adirondack Park, Mike, and New York can be problematic, but there are small streams that are either on public land or unposted land. There's plenty of them, but it's not like in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has a lot of public access, a lot of public streams, and in Pennsylvania has a law that if you can get in a water like Montana, if you can get in a water at a public access, then you can. If you stay in the river or the stream, you can navigate it, you can wade it. So, but New York is not New York. You can own the bottom of the river, and you can keep people from wading through your property. So it's not as friendly to small stream fishing. But there's lots of state parks and public land in New York where you can. All right. Where are we? Oh my God.
I know.
Wow. Lots of questions today.
Engaged folks.
Yeah. Have missed bites on river dart, Devin. Am I striking too early or too late? Frustrating. Tim, like I said before, if you're fishing small streams, you're going to miss a lot of them. You're just going to miss a lot of them. Mm-hmm. If anything, you're probably striking too late. Those fish will grab a fly very quickly and spit it out very quickly. But your reaction time sometimes can't be quick enough. And sometimes the fish just splash at a fly if it's too big for them. Mm-hmm. But you'll miss a lot of strikes. How many strikes did we miss yesterday? Lots of them. Lots and lots and lots of them. You're going to miss strikes. But the thing is that you'll have a lot of opportunities. So eventually you'll hook one. What's your most productive flies you've used during the fall season? Productive flies, same things as I've mentioned before. Chubby Chernobyls, parachute Adams. Doesn't seem to change much in the fall. Fall can get a little bit more difficult, particularly if you have a lot of deciduous trees where the leaves are falling, because I think it puts the fish off when there's a lot of leaves in the water. So a lot of debris, and the fish I think maybe tuck away to get from being slapped in the face with leaves. So the best advice I can give you is try to pick a calm day when there's not a lot of leaves in the water. But it can be difficult. And fish do slow down their feeding in the fall. The water temperature is cool and their metabolism slows down. They don't feed as much, so it's a little tougher. Is there a general rule when it comes to size relation when using a dry dropper rig? Not really. You probably want a fairly large nymph, but you don't want one that's going to be so big that it sinks your dry fly. But I'll often experiment. We change the nymph around a little bit. I'll often experiment with the nymph. Usually not with the dry. Usually if they're going to take a dry, they'll take any old dry. Sometimes the nymph you have to poke around. We finally settled on purple yesterday, and that worked. Well, thank you all for joining us today. It was a great pleasure to have you here. You guys asked some great questions. Great pleasure having you here.
Thanks for having
and
me.
fishing with you. You are so much fun. Erica was laughing and giggling and hooting and hollering at the smallest fish. It was so much fun.
I couldn't think of who was louder, me or you.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We were both pretty excited about it. And you still get excited over a 4-inch brook trout, no matter how long you've been fishing. I think anyway.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it was lots of fun, and it was great having Julia here producing the show from the director's chair back there. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next month.
Yeah.
I don't know what the date is, but 1 month from today, 4 weeks from
I will
today.
let you know it is.
Okay.
Next show is November 4th.
Next show is November 4th, Thursday. We don't know what we're going to talk about yet. Yeah. So if you have any suggestions, you can maybe fire them away to the Orvis Instagram account or Facebook account, right?
Yeah, they can DM us or
direct message us on our Facebook or Instagram if you have some suggestions for another show. And Novice, we want to stick to the basics here because we're awkward and clueless.
That's right.
So thank you all, and thank you for your great question. It really means a lot to us that you take the time to listen to us talk.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.